This is our Tech to Pop assignment, and it's actually a proposal. So at one time, I used to have students actually create the translation, but I've decided to do it a proposal because I feel like it's a bit less overwhelming to do it this way, and it still gets us to think about what we need to think about our audience, our users, and the way we can communicate are really field specific information to a lay audience. So, in a nutshell, you are choosing a miscommunication in your field. So, for point one, be sure you're choosing a miscommunication that is affecting the public, your field, or preferably both. So often students will choose topics like people think that engineers aren't social. Now, while there is definitely a misunderstanding there, what we're wanting to do is find a misunderstanding that may have a negative effect on the public or the field itself. So, now, while people do think that engineers are antisocial or they're bad communicators, that's very true. But the best kind of miscommunications to tackle are more ones that are affecting your field, and that because the miscommunication means the public doesn't trust the field, or there's not enough funding being put into the field, or it's not drawing people to the field. So you want to focus a little bit more on the way that it affects like both the public and the field, rather than just like, oh, people think this silly thing about us. Unless you can kind of find a way to frame how that silly thing is negatively affecting the public, the field, or like I said, preferably the two. Um, so another thing you're doing is you're finding one popular translation that has already tried to tackle the problem, and you're going to analyze that popular translation. So for this point, after you find the translation, you're going to analyze it within the proposal that you're writing, explaining the audience that it's intended to reach and its pros and cons. As you explain what works and what doesn't, remember you will use the analysis to help explain why your proposal is better. And you need to always keep the audience in mind. Don't just say, this infomercial is ineffective because it's dull and uses jargon. Yeah, that is why it's ineffective, but make it more specific. You're bumping up your work from B work to A work whenever you get more specific. So instead, you would say, because this infomercial is geared toward a younger audience, mostly from 18 to 35, who vote and are concerned with their community, but may not be well versed in the field's terminology, the language and approach the infomercial fails at effectively reaching and engaging the target audience. See how I moved from like just on the face dull or obvious, right? Most of the time, a lot of these popular translations you're going to look to are going to make similar mistakes, right? They're going to use too much jargon. They're going to be dull. What you need to do is describe that in terms of the audience it's trying to work with and why it's not working for that audience, right? So the difference between a B and a C and an A is that the A is consistently coming back to how it's failing the audience, how it's not reaching its goal of communicating to a specific audience, how it's maybe perpetuating the problem rather than clearing it up. So this is something I want you to keep in mind the entire time you're writing this, as you're writing about the analysis of the translation you found, and then also explaining why yours works better. It's not just in a general sense, it's for like that specific target audience that you've mapped out in your introduction. And then you are writing a proposal for a better translation. So this means that you are saying this one that I found is also addressing, this issue that's going on in our field, and it does this well, but it's failing at this. Let me give you an idea for a translation that's going to remedy all those problems and then also use the strengths of the translation I just analyzed. So these are all things to keep in mind. Now remember, you are writing an in-house proposal to your boss. So your proposal needs to take into account that that is the writing situation. You're not writing this to me. You're not writing it to no one. You're not writing it to a mystery person. I want you to imagine you're writing to your boss. So as you do this, you need to take into account what the boss needs to hear. What do you need to do? If you're going to be writing proposals to your supervisors whenever you get into your field, you need to think about what moves you need to make as an employee writing to a boss to like get them to believe this is the best idea. So that means you need to take into account how it's hurting your business, how it's hurting your field, and how this proposal is going to benefit your boss, benefit your field, make your company look better. So take into account who you're talking to, move it into that, like really write this as if you're talking to a boss and make the moves you would to convince a boss that this is the best translation and that this is going to do the work that you need it to do. So here are some general requirements, kind of the nuts and bolts. It's going to be 2 to 3 pages, single spaced, and that's not including images. So if you have, 5 giant images, you need to have more than 2 paragraphs of text. So it needs to be 2 to 3 pages before you have those images in there. You need to provide an introduction that describes what you are doing and why you are doing it. That's just Proposal Writing 101. What problem are you addressing in your field and why have you chosen it? Include an analysis of one other type of popular translation. I used to do 2, but I felt like online it can be harder to find these, and to make it a little bit easier since we don't see each other weekly, I knocked it down to 1 because I feel like that will give you enough to work with. But just 1. Find one other popular translation that is tackling the same or a very similar issue in the field. As you're doing your analysis on that one, I want you to quote or provide images of the translation you found. So if it is a video that you found, I want you to use specific quotes from it. And if it's an image, I want you to include screenshots. You can also, if it's like a written piece of literature, some kind of popular translation, you can do both of them. But be sure you're doing one or the other or both. Provide quotes, provide images. Best papers are going to include both of them. And just follow 2009 MLA formatting for your quotes. And then be sure that your images are formatted properly. You know how to do that from our last unit. Be sure that they're labeled, that they have a caption, that they're referenced. And then end with an explanation as to why the translation, well, with your proposal, first of all, you're going to end with, I propose this, and then be sure that you explain why it's going to be effective by comparing it and contrasting it to the example, to the analysis, to the translation that already exists. So you'll point out how it's still accomplishing the strengths of that one, but how it's actually remedying, right? It's doing something better that the other one failed to do. So that's basically it, right? It's just a proposal. It's saying this is a problem in our field. We need to address it. This is how it's negatively affecting our field. Now I'm going to, in this proposal, I'm going to look at another translation to demonstrate how other companies have tried to tackle it. Then I'm going to go on to propose something I think will do better. And then you go on to do that. You just do that in a lot more nuanced way than I just did. All right, so what are some example problems? Since I said maybe moving away from everyone thinks that engineers aren't sociable, what are some other problems that would give us kind of more to work with? These could be a lack of women in the field of engineering, a misunderstanding about the dangers of fracking, either a fear of the wrong parts of fracking or a misunderstanding about what it does, a lack of knowledge on what to do in a tornado. If you are in meteorology, this is an important part of your field. A lack of interest or knowledge of young people in your major. So note, the best problems for this experiment will be those in which scientists fail to consider and serve a specific population of users. So remember, this is a specific population. We're not just trying to catch everybody in the universe because we can't, right? To have effective communication, we have to have a clear audience in mind. So this is what we want to think about as we are choosing these. All right, so what are popular translations anyway? Well, they can be TED Talks, comic strip, campus campaigns, or community campaigns. A social media page, or say animate, can be simple as an infographic, can be radio labs, which we've listened to, a museum exhibit, or a public service announcement. So these can come in lots of forms, and I provided just little screenshots of a few. We've got a Twitter account here. Here's a comic strip that I've had a student use before, an infographic that lays out a problem. So they come in lots of forms. But wait, they don't all have to be still images or just Twitter feeds, right? You can use YouTube, right? See what's going on YouTube. You'll find a lot of different stuff on YouTube that can help, that come from different places. The thing is, you need to know what organization is putting it on and why. We've got TED Talks that we can use. So a lot of students do TED Talks. They're really super cool. But don't limit yourself to just that. And then this is Elon Musk and Tesla, a little campaign that they have. It's just like a commercial, basically, where it's showing, the Tesla that's been launched out there. So there are a range of different things that you can pick. Be creative with this. Try not to just pick the first thing that you find. Find something cool. But also remember, you're waging a critique against it. But if it's cool, then you get to really dig down into, this is already good. How can I make this even better? So don't shy away from that. All right, so let's talk about the key components. So the introduction, what do you need to do there? You need to define the problem and who you're writing to. So within the introduction, you need to state exigence. This should introduce the purpose or objective of your report. Why are you writing this? What problem is your popular translation, analysis, and proposal attempting to solve? So why are you even writing it? What's going on? Tell me what the problem is. There are not enough women working in STEM. Why is that a problem? What is your objective with this campaign? You need to also identify the audience. So what is the specific audience that you're speaking to? Are they 18-year-old women about to go into college? Are they freshmen and sophomore women in college? Are they women who have degrees in STEM but may not be going out into the field? Who exactly are you speaking to? Because this needs to be clearly defined, as it's going to dictate why things do and do not work, right? A different thing is going to work for 5th grade science students than it's going to for 19-year-old college freshmen. So be sure you're defining that and keeping that as a focal point as you're writing. And then remember, this is going to take the form of a user persona, right? You imagine what they know, what their education background is, what their interests are, what their values, what could be obstacles for them, what's going to better reach one population and not the other. Why might it be ridiculous to start a social media page if you're trying to reach the population that's 75 and older, right? Think about these things. And then it should also briefly introduce the source that you've chosen to analyze. So you're not going to analyze it yet, but you're briefly going to say, in order to see how other companies have tackled to this, I've chosen to look at a TED Talk done by blah, blah, blah on this, right? So you're just kind of letting your boss know, I'm about to look at some research to see the pros and cons so we can see what works and what doesn't. And then you'll go on to analyze it. In the analysis, you need to talk about your example. What are they doing? Why are they doing it? So be sure to include reasoning behind why you've chosen your source. Why choose this example and not another? Why choose a TED Talk and not something else? And then how is it suitable for your audience and problem? You want to describe, sorry about that. You want to describe the rhetorical moves of the source with specific examples. So what is it? Is it a comic strip? Is it a PSA? Is it a community campaign? What does it do? Like what purposes or what moves is it making? How does it do it? Is it using, animation? Is it using humor? Is it using pathos, right? Emotional pull? Is it using face-to-face contact as in a community campaign or college or campus campaign might? Why does it do this? And then how well is it specifically serving your audience? So here I want you to think about its actual media and format. So if it's a community-wide campaign and it's geared towards a younger generation or even campus students, is it effective? Is there a better way to do it? Is there a reason they did it that way? Is there something else they need to be doing? So think about all of these facets, like how it's designed, what media it's in, and take those into an analysis of the audience that you described in the introduction. And then be sure that you talk about what works and what doesn't, and then you'll draw on that in your proposal part. So your proposal is, what are we going to do? What are we going to do better? So just summarize the takeaways from your analysis, from the pros and cons, what you will learn to avoid, and what works well for the specific audience. Apply what you've learned to solve the problem. And then generate a specific proposal, right? So what are you going to do? How are you going to do it? How is it going to work for your audience? Be sure on this last point that you discuss the feasibility. So how much is it going to cost? Who's going to do it? Why is it going to be worth it? Remember, part of this is persuading your boss that this is worth the time and money it takes. So be sure to include how much it'll cost, why it's feasible, why it's worth it whenever you're doing your proposal and your conclusion. And you can't see this super well. It's tiny, right? But this is an example of a student who made an A on this paper. I have this also within the modules in Canvas, so you can go and hop on and see it closer. But this is just kind of like a bird's eye view of it. So you can see the way that they use statistics at the beginning and actually include a graph there. They include screenshot. They include this, and see, these students had to do 2 different ones, so it's a bit longer and it has more images. But and this is how many references that they used, right? So this is a student that did really well, and like I said, so you can see more of it. You can hop into Canvas to look at that. You also see they formatted it like a memo, like a proposal. It's formatted correctly as well. So these are all things to pay attention to, and your homework is going to be now to choose your problem. What miscommunication or misunderstanding is in your field? And remember, look for one that has an adverse effect on the public and or the field. Best ones are going to be something that you can explain how it's negatively affecting both. If you have any questions or comments, remember I'm always here, email or office hours. And good luck finding your miscommunication.